It's Thursday, 18th of April 2024, and welcome to the Water Action Platform. We've got a feast of variety for you this month, all of which only made possible by our fantastic sponsors listed here. We've got a story about a beautifully elegant, completely new technology, a research roundup on long COVID, an eye-opening sector expert on the art of storytelling, a brilliant interview on changing the law to enable innovation, and the newly discovered answer to a 140-year-old physics mystery. Let's dive in. We start with the story of a successful technology trial at full scale in an operational environment and leading directly to immediate implementation. This is just the formal way of saying they tried it, they liked it, they bought it. Anyone familiar with biological wastewater treatment will already know about membrane bioreactors, or MBRs. In a nutshell, membrane bioreactors use membranes in combination with activated sludge. It's an aerobic process in which air is pumped in through fine bubble diffusers to keep the activated sludge alive and well in the aerobic zone, and coarse bubble diffusers to scour the surface of the membranes and keep them clean. Now, this particular wastewater contains high levels of carbohydrates and colour compounds, sticky things, which caused severe problems with fouling on the membranes and on the diffusers. Enter VorTech Water Solutions. I had the absolute pleasure of talking to Sean Mulligan about how they solved these problems with the support of the Isle Trow Reservoir and the 2023 Xylem Accelerator Programme. Now, Sean, from a very young age, was interested in water and hydraulics. He did his undergraduate studies in civil engineering, and that led him into academia for 4 or 5 years, working on hydraulics, fluid dynamics, and their application to real-world problems. And those led to him to developing the vortex-powered aeration, or VPA, process. Sean then decided he'd just start his own company. So Sean is obviously not self-motivated or driven at all, just after a quiet life. Here's Sean.
Tell us a little bit about the technology and how it was implemented in this particular use case.
Yeah, so I'm really delighted to talk to you about this, what we call one of our world-class reference sites. And it's been great to have, obviously, support from Isle Utilities, Isle Reservoir, and Xylem Innovation Labs along the way. This project is for basically a global beverage company based in Ireland. And that beverage company produces waste from carbonated beverages and production of carbonated beverages. In their wastewater treatment facility on site, they have the biological treatment step carried out by what's called membrane bioreactor technology. What we're doing in a membrane bioreactor is we're increasing the bacteria, or what we call the biomass, or the mixed liquor suspended solids, by 3 or 4 times that of a traditional activated sludge plant. And we could do this because of the filtration process, and that's what unlocks the small footprint and better quality effluent. The challenge then, though, Joe, is that that higher mixed liquor, and combined with the characteristics of the influence stream, causes very significant fouling issues on fine bubble diffuser aeration systems.
So
secondly, and secondly, the mixed liquor suspended solids also increases viscosity in the activated sludge reactors, so that then inhibits oxygen transfer. As a result of that, at this facility, the energy costs would rise very quickly at the facility due to the fouling and also due to the low alpha factors resulting from high mixed liquor. That resulted in the client having to drain and clean their tank at very regular intervals of between 1 and 1.5 years. As a result of that, you have the energy increasing, you have increased OpEx due to very frequent maintenance, but also high risks of safety, poor safety for operators, requiring them to access tanks that are quite deep below the ground, in this case 6 meters. We've developed basically a new class of patented aeration technology called vortex-powered aeration. And what's different about our technology is that rather than in this case study where we bring air to water through fine bubble diffusers, we bring water to air in a pumping and vortex cyclonic flow system. What this allows us to do, in particular at this site, is allows us to very simply retrofit existing activated sludge reactors, or MBR reactors, at the top of the tank. That then subsequently allows the client to access all of their equipment above the waterline, therefore no future tank draining requirements, and enhance energy efficiency, particularly in these cases where you have very challenging wastewater characteristics.
And you can retrofit, so this is not something that has to be done right from the get-go. You can go back and install it on a brownfield or an existing site.
Yes, indeed. So some of our reference sites, we now have reference sites in both municipal and industrial applications across Ireland and the UK. And we have done both new builds and retrofits. More on the retrofit side so far, but we've done new builds, and we will be doing more new builds actually in 2024.
Fantastic. And is this site a retrofit then, Sean? Did you have to go back and replace something that was already there?
Yeah, so in the membrane bioreactor at this facility, they had basically membrane filtration system on top of a coarse bubble diffuser. And then the aerobic treatment was being carried out by diffuse aeration. Because the diffusers were fouling rapidly, our solution retrofitted on top of the diffusers. All of the existing equipment was kept in place. Our system was retrofitted in 2 or 3 days, 1.5 days per unit, on top of a live reactor, meaning no downtime to existing plant or no disruption to existing treatment processes.
Amazing. And what were the key things that you wanted to measure then to show that you'd provided an improvement to your client over and above what was there before?
Yeah, what we do that's unique at VorTech is we provide initially what's called an aeration energy audit. So we go and we look at all of the existing challenges at the site and measure them. And we're talking the current energy usage for every kilogram of BOD that's treated, for example, what's the maintenance regimes look like, and so on. And we can project that out. So we did that baseline analysis at the facility, and then we came back after the upgrade and we measured the time it took to retrofit, the maintenance requirements across the year, which were more or less diminished, and we can come back to that. And also the energy for every kilogram of COD or BOD that was removed in the process, along with also looking at effluent quality and other aspects like that.
Of course, yes. And what were the key results then when it comes to things like the effluent quality? And were you able to make actual calculations to show that the energy demand had been reduced?
Yeah, indeed. So we monitored the BOD removal before and after. What was beginning to occur at the facility was very low oxygen levels in the tank prior to our upgrade. And when we retrofitted and turned on the units, we seen immediately the dissolved oxygen boost from like 0.5 milligrams per liter up to 4 or 5, and then we could control it. We also noticed that we resuspended a lot of kind of old like organic matter that might have been settling out at the bottom of the reactor, which was a really good sign that we were able to do that. And as a result of boosting the DO and then maintaining DO levels that what the client wanted to see, overnight the energy levels dropped by the order of 40 to 60%, just overnight from the day one of installation. But over the course of the year, we were able to demonstrate 30 to 35% average reductions in energy at the facility.
What does the impact on greenhouse gas emissions look like from those kind of numbers?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've taken the greenhouse gas emission equivalent attached to electricity in Ireland, and then we were able to couple that directly with the electricity savings that were achieved. So on average, across a whole year, you're talking between 30 and 35% reduction in carbon emission equivalents. And we've also at the site developed a unique kind of dashboard with the VorTech solution for the clients. So when they're logging their daily energy on the VorTech dashboard, it displays actually the carbon emission savings every day. And that's tied back to the baseline energy that was consumed at the facility before our upgrade.
Amazing. So it's safe to use, it's easy to fit, it saves them 90% of their maintenance and slash the carbon equivalent emissions by a third. That's incredible.
Sean, thank you so much for this amazing example. I absolutely love when researchers go back to first principles and turn established methods on their heads. VPA is a whole new class of aeration technology. It simplifies the treatment process by pumping water to air rather than air to water. And in so doing, it confers a whole host of advantages, not least of which are energy and carbon savings, cost savings, and huge improvements in worker safety. Although lockdowns are behind us, at least for now, it's become clear that we're left with the legacy of long COVID. Now, when we hear the word polio in 2024, what we think of could be called long polio. Fresh headlines came out just last month when the last man with long polio passed away after living in an iron lung for over 70 years. He was exceptionally unlucky. 96% of polio sufferers either had no symptoms at all, or they had a sore throat and a low fever, and it cleared up in a week or two. However, millions of people have been just as unlucky as he was, but with COVID. So what is long COVID? Well, the term long COVID is currently being used for a vast array of different long-term illnesses after acute COVID has cleared up. We thought this might be the case a year ago, and now we know it is. It can include a range of things, for example, viral persistence, where SARS-CoV-2 hides in people's tissues for a long period of time, or immune dysregulation. In some long COVID patients, the immune response doesn't stop after the infection has cleared. Their immune systems are continually responding. We know that COVID can damage the vagus nerve, which is an important part of our nervous system that regulates things like our heart rate and our blood pressure, and we know it can reactivate other viruses like the herpes virus. We need a better understanding of how to distinguish all these root causes, otherwise we will never know how to treat them. How many people are suffering? Well, this is a trick question because of this diversity of causes and symptoms, but all of the estimates are in the tens of millions. The prevalence, which is the number of people in our community, and the incidence, which is the number of new people who get it, are both really difficult to estimate. England has one of the best surveillance systems where their Office of National Statistics randomly surveys the public for long COVID. Now, this study is unfortunately coming to an end, but what they've learned is that the risk of long COVID drops from the second infection onwards. From the first infection risk of 4%, it declines to 2.4%. This is good and bad news. Risk drops, but not to zero. Their study showed that the number of people with long COVID is declining despite ongoing infection waves, as you can see in this graph. The long COVID dots, the squares, are not rising and falling along with the blue line of waves of COVID. Now, why should this be? Well, some scientists, including me, believe this is due to a decline in severe disease caused both by the decreasing numbers of people who are unvaccinated and decreasing numbers of people who have severe disease, because we all know that severe disease is a predictor for long COVID. We're also running out of people who aren't vaccinated, and at the start of 2023, we didn't know how much vaccines help or whether boosters have any effect on your risk of having long COVID. New information has shown us that in children, being vaccinated provides a 35% protection against probable long COVID, so judging by symptoms just after vaccination, or 42% protection against diagnosed long COVID 12 months after vaccination took place. Adults who've had booster shots are less likely to get long COVID. This is called a dose-response relationship. A 2022-23 study showed that one dose of vaccine lowers your risk of long COVID by 21%, even if you are infected. 2 doses lowers your risk by 59%, and 3 shots or more lower your risk by 73%. Today's sector expert is Houston Spencer. I recently had the privilege of participating in Xylem Innovation Lab's symposium, where I met Houston for the first time. He leads communications and public affairs at Xylem. Before splashing around in water, Houston's professional adventures took him into the high-tech, the mining, the consulting, and the philanthropy sectors, always specializing in marketing and stakeholder strategy. At the symposium, Houston presented a spellbinding session that absolutely blew my hair back, so much so that I put on my most irresistible face and asked him afterwards if he would do it again. Being an absolute gentleman, here he is.
Houston, brilliant to see you again. You sound American, but you're half Australian, right?
That's true.
Guilty as charged, okay. And you describe yourself as being married to a flame-haired angel and issued me with a caution to only ask about your dogs if I really, really, really want to hear about them. So let's save the subject of dogs for another day, and today we can concentrate on storytelling. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Joe, and probably best that you that we don't go into the dog topic because we'll be there a while. Joe, you and I were together recently in Washington D.C. with a bunch of tech entrepreneurs in the water space, and I had been asked to come in and do a little bit of education or maybe a bit of a sheep dip on storytelling, specifically in the water space. And the group gave me 10 questions to answer on the day. I'm going to narrow those down to 5 for the purposes of doing it a bit shorter today. Question 1 that the group gave me was describe your perfect one-pager marketing leave behind. Well, I think this is a little bit different for tech entrepreneurs than it is for, say, people in utilities. But the perfect one-pager these days, first of all, it's very visual, not too much reading to do. Therefore, you need to fill it up with things that seduce the eyes: charts, graphs, infographics, images of solutions in process in the field, or having an actual impact on communities. It's got to be virtual. We're not actually leaving pages behind anymore, right? So it's got to be something that you can deliver digitally. And then that leads to the third point, which is that it needs to be easy for others to pass on. It needs to be something that can go viral in your network if people like it. Question number 2. What are the highest impact marketing strategies in 2024 for technologies in the water industry? First is segmentation. Make sure you're only talking to the people who are really going to be interested in what you're doing. Don't try and talk to everybody because you're trying to get clicks and likes and things like that. Really focus on who you want to talk to, who you're of value to. Second is reputation. Don't worry so much about making a lot of news or hype. Really think about your reputation, which builds slowly over time. You accrete your reputation by being credible and by being useful. And then thirdly, make sure that everything you're doing in your marketing is about making someone's life easier. It's great that you've got a great solution. It's great that you're having super impact on communities, but how are you making a buyer's life easier? Or if you work for a water utility, how are you making the public's life better? If you can tell your story in a way that augments somebody's existence, making their life easier, giving them things they want, then they're going to pay more attention. Okay, question number 3, tips on inexpensive ways to publicly celebrate your success through PR channels. Well, this is equally relevant to folks that are tech entrepreneurs in the water space or folks who are working in utilities or other kinds of water operators. First, don't talk about yourself so much. Make somebody else the hero of your story. The more you're talking up others, the more others are going to be interested in talking you up. Secondly, build a direct distribution list for industry trades, but also for influencers in the water sector, and make sure they're receiving your news directly. Lastly, when you create news, great, put it out. Release the news in public press releases or in media advisories or in other kinds of publications. Publish it yourself on every platform you have access to, and then distribute it. Post about it on social media. People think that good PR is about coming up with a really catchy story, and that's not unimportant, but actually most of what happens in PR happens because of really great distribution to the right people. All right, question 4. What are best practices for getting maximum visibility for your content on LinkedIn? Well, I'm going to give you a free, a near free, and a paid answer to this. Free, get your network of people, preferably professionals in the water space that other people respect, but really anybody in your network, friends, family, get them to be your hype machine. When you put something out, make sure they are sharing it and sending it to everybody they know. Secondly, near free. Be visually compelling. Going back to that first point about the marketing leave behind, right? We're just inundated with text and we can only read so much. We mostly scroll past text these days, but what catches our eye is compelling visuals. And that can be imagery, but it can also be charts and graphs. It can be infographics. You can be as creative as you like, but be visual in some way. And then lastly, paid. It takes less money than you think to actually get your content really well targeted at the right audience on LinkedIn. Not that expensive. Give it a try. When you do that, though, make sure you're getting the best out of your money, the greatest value for your money, by being visual. Question 5. What do climate-focused companies often get wrong in their storytelling? And the sort of corollary question to that, with so much media focused on doomsday scenarios about water, What's the right balance? Well, what people get wrong is they focus on the problems. Like, here's what we're going after that's going to get really, really hard for you. It's going to be terrible for the community, or it's going to increase your workload, or it's going to shoot regulatory compliance through the roof. Yep, those are real, but they also are a bummer, right? And then the other thing that we do is not only we focus on the bad stuff, but we focus on the big concept stuff, like things like water scarcity or day zero, or right. You need to be human. Talk at the personal level. How is something affecting human beings, and how is what you have to offer going to make their lives better? Be specific about that. Get into what it's like in my day, your day, the community member's day, and then be an actual solution to that human problem, not the big high concept problem. Be a solution to the human problem. But really, for all of us in the water sector, the biggest challenge is that all of us are talking to ourselves because we already think water is a big deal. The big challenge we have as storytellers in water is getting anybody else to notice. And with that, Joe, back to you.
That was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to throw you now with a surprise question that you weren't expecting. Media channels, are there any good ones?
Well, the way to think about media now in 2024 is just so different than even folks in their 30s and 40s, younger than me, have thought about media for most of their careers. There are still good conventional media channels out there, both trade outlets and tier one business publications, but they're fewer and fewer. And at those outlets, there's less staffing, less resourcing available to actually pay attention to press releases and new news. So it's very difficult to get any decent reporting or feature reporting done. Really, social media is the way to get reporters' attention. So even if you want to be good at conventional media, you have to be really good at social media first.
Houston, thank you so much. There were about 10 revelations for me in there, facepalm moments of things that are so obvious when you hear them, and yet we just don't do them. Our second sector expert today is Rafael Fassio. We all know that the water industry is tightly regulated. Procurement is often a barrier to innovation, and this is especially true in Brazil. But things are changing. Brazil enacted legislation designed to not only enable innovation, but actually to promote it, especially in the water industry. My friend and colleague, Dr. Chantal Kutzer, had a conversation with Rafael Fassio. Rafael is state attorney in the state of Sao Paulo, and he had lots more to tell us.
Rafael, it is wonderful to have you join the Water Action platform. I think my first question for you today is around the what prompted the design of the innovation regulation within the public sector. Maybe you want to tell us a bit about where it all started.
Well, first things first, thank you so much for having me here, Chantal. And the design of procurement regulations is very interesting because it has to be, and often is, something very different from regular procurement itself. So here in Brazil, we do have very strict and formal procurement regulations since 1993. But in 2021, we had 2 laws that passed reforms that are very important in innovation procurement. So in what comes to the design of specific innovation procurement procedures, I would definitely highlight the Brazilian Startup Act, which was also enacted in 2021. And it is our first example of a challenge-based acquisition procedure here in Brazil, which is great news because public entities are waived in defining or describing technical specs of the object they're trying to purchase, and they're allowed to focus more on the problem that they're facing. So that solutions in the best fashion of open innovation can come from outside the organization. So private partners, startups, companies can provide great inputs on how you can solve those problems. And in the end of the day, that's the main criteria for award, for contract awards in the Startup Act procedure. So the problems are the main criteria for evaluation. So projects are evaluated based on how they best or not solve the problem behind the contracting procedure. So that's really important, as I mentioned, because it is our first procedure directed towards testing of innovative solutions in real environments with real people in real contexts, and it allows to testing for contracts up to 1.6 million reais, which is around 325 US dollars. To $325,000 US dollars. I apologize for the numbers. And if objectives are met, if it succeeded, so if the objectives put in the RFP, in the original RFP are met, you are allowed to have the same provider a new contract up to 8 million reais, which is about 1.5 million US dollars.
Can you tell me a bit about how you've gone about implementing this? It couldn't have been easy.
It is not, because, as I mentioned, Brazil has a tradition of very strict and formal procurement regulations, which are often based in one single criteria, which is price, the most objective criteria you can have. And when you're talking about how you better solve a problem, it is obviously that you're going to apply some degree of subjectiveness into this evaluation procedure. So that is new for us as public attorneys, but also public entities are also struggling to implement this. But the good news is that we have several entities that are already using it for real life problems here in Brazil. We have a very important use and a very leading use case from Petrobras, our state-owned company in oil and gas industry, which has already several procedures under the Startup Act in very many different challenges, mostly related to the oil and gas industry. There's a very important lesson from policy and theory that focusing on the problem, number one lesson in design thinking, for example, putting users in the center, is very important. It's key to understand which type of procurement procedure are you going to need. So given and evidence shows that successful innovation procurement procedures in Europe and US and mainly, anywhere, they share in common a very in-depth study of the problem that was being faced before even considering to choose procurement procedures.
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, Chantal. As Rafael pointed out, change is hard, especially in a conservative, regulated sector like ours. But his examples show that it can be done. As the Startups Law has gained traction in Brazil, so Rafael has been seconded into the World Economic Forum to streamline public procurement of AI solutions globally. And finally, we're going back to fluid dynamics. Now, physics might not be the lightest topic to finish on, but a problem that physicists have grappled with since 1883 has just been solved, and it is fascinating. The problem is this. You have an S-shaped lawn sprinkler, so an S-shaped pipe on a pivot, and the water squirts out at right angles to the axis and makes it spin in a certain direction. Everybody knows which way it goes round. It backs away from the outgoing water. Now the question is this. If you had a water tank and you submerged the sprinkler completely underwater and sucked the water in instead of pushing it out, which way would it turn? Would it, 1, turn in the direction that it does when you push water out into air, or 2, would it turn the other way? This riddle of Feynman's sprinkler was popularized by physicist Richard Feynman. The answer is perfectly clear at first sight, he wrote in his memoir, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. The trouble was, some guy would think it was perfectly clear in one direction, and another guy would think it was perfectly clear the other way. The first documented description of this problem is in a textbook, The Science of Mechanics, which was published in 1883. And there the author reported that the device showed no distinct movement at all. In the 1940s, this problem began to circulate among members of the physics department at Princeton University in the USA, and it generated a lively debate. Richard Feynman, who was at the time a young graduate student, gave one theoretical argument for why the sprinkler should rotate in the thought direction, and another one for why it should rotate in reverse. Feynman then built a makeshift experiment in the university's cyclotron laboratory. His experiment ended in an explosion of the glass equipment that he was using. He did not say whether or how the sprinkler actually moved. The complexities of flow and turbulence mean that all past experiments have either been inconclusive or given contradictory results, or in Feynman's case, an explosion, broken glass, and a thorough soaking. However, researchers have now carefully designed a sprinkler to remove all the confounding effects, and the results are in this absolutely gorgeous image. Detailed observations backed up by mathematical modelling have demonstrated that there's a weak jet effect inside the device, and that's what dominates the sprinkler's motion. What they've shown is that the underwater sprinkler rotates in the opposite direction to the normal one, but unsteadily and about 50 times slower. It might seem that reversing a submerged sprinkler is not of great practical interest, but there are applications in which it's really important to be able to precisely control flows ejected from devices and to understand how the process modifies the forces they experience. For example, there's lots of application in technologies that harvest energy from the movement of water or air. With that, we come to the end of this month's broadcast. Once again, I'd like to thank all of these fantastic sponsors and all of today's contributors. The May Water Action platform will include both Piers and me and will feature a story from the Caribbean. We hope you'll join us, but until then, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.